You're watching WHPS, Highland Park, Detroit.
FM 88.1 WHPR, Highland Park.
WVIE 107.3 FM Charlotte, Amalia, Virgin Islands.
The views and opinions expressed on the following show are not necessarily the views and opinions of WHPS, its affiliates, management, or sponsors.
It's that time, y'all. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Yeah, it's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Yeah, it's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. It's straight talk with Valerie. It's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It's straight talk with Valerie. Come on. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream.
Good evening, Detroit. Thank you for tuning in to 88.1 FM, Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream, Straight Talk with Valerie. What's going on tonight? We are so happy to have this very candid conversation with you this evening. The topic of this show is called, Do All Lives Matter? Asking for an exoneree who's been in a cage. We have two gentlemen in the studio with us this evening. One did 34 years as an innocent man for a crime that he did not commit. The other gentleman had a charge put on him for criminal sexual conduct where he couldn't even be around his own kids. Detroit, and surrounding areas, I want to introduce you to Actshun Terrell and Mr. Darryl Siggars. How are you gentlemen doing?
I'm doing wonderful.
Good. I want to thank you so much for coming into the studio and telling your story this evening. I want to dispel a lot of myths about the wrongfully convicted. I want to dispel a lot of myths about exoneration and a few other things. So we're going to start out with Mr. Terrell.
Yes, ma'am.
You were sharing a little bit with me about your story. So can you tell the audience a little bit about your story?
Most definitely. I want to first and foremost say thank you for giving me this platform to be able to speak. My story starts off like this. In 2013, I was convicted of criminal sexual conduct, in which I was a high school football coach. I was working in a lunchroom one day, and a kid hit me with a cracker. When the kid hit me with a cracker, I went straight directly to the kid. As I get to the kid, he jumps up. He says, "I'm sorry, Coach Actshun." He starts, wilding out. And I told him, I said, no problem. I walk away. A few hours later, I get a call to the office. I get arrested. They said I sexually abused a young lady. Now, I'm baffled. Once they arrest me, they put me in jail, handcuff me. They wouldn't let me use the restroom. I used the restroom on myself. Oh. I was in prison for 72 hours before anyone did anything. The detective at the time didn't do his job. They allowed him to not be held accountable for not going to get the tape. There was a tape involved in which seen the whole incident. One of the security guards at the time went and seen the tape. And she testified and said she didn't see any wrongdoing on the tape whatsoever. And I was still convicted of criminal sexual conduct to the 4th degree. I wasn't in prison, but I was put on the sex offenders list for 25 years. I had to take sex offender classes in which people were in there that were real rapists, that were real sexual offenders. And it ruined me, and I was embarrassed to even talk about this. I was embarrassed to go around without people pointing the finger because they didn't know. Then I instantly got the notion and the strength to come up and tell my side of the story, and stand up for people who's going through what I've been through. People who don't have a voice, I want to be that voice for them because I know how scary it can be. So that's what happened.
Wow. And as a result of that, you weren't even allowed to be around your own children, correct?
That's correct. I have a son that's autistic, and at the time he was 6. I couldn't be around him. I have a daughter who has cerebral palsy, and I couldn't be around her. I was building and repairing computers. I had taught people. I had a store in which I opened, in which people can come in and build their own computers. They told me I couldn't even do that. I couldn't use computers. I lost jobs. I lost, everything behind this.
Wow. Let's move on to Mr. Darryl Siggars. You did 34 years, so you were incarcerated, and you did 34 years. Tell us about your conviction and what happened to you.
In 1984, first, before I begin, let me thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for being the voice that you are about wrongful convictions and injustice and in criminal reform. In 1984, I was 20 years old. I was arrested. Police asked to talk to me, and I initially didn't want to talk to them. We were at a home where a party occurred with my son and daughter's mother. 3 gentlemen came in. There were 3 of us already there. A scuffle began, and the mother of the home, Christine, the mother of my 3 children, came out and asked these 3 gentlemen to leave. They refused. Subsequently, they left, and one of the gentlemen that was there with us left also in the midst of the scuffle, saying, "I got something for y'all last, I'll be back." As they get halfway down the street, we hear shots. I'm still in the house. We hear shots down the road. But I don't know, in the hood, shots are not uncommon. So I really didn't think anything of it. So subsequently, I leave. When I leave, I get home. Police tell me they want to talk to me, and I refuse, because every time any of my older brothers and family members had encounters with the police, it was not a good outcome. And so I didn't want to talk to them at all. And so that's what drew a red flag for me. They began to try to pursue me. So they kept saying they wanted to talk to me. My father said, "Listen, boy, you ain't got nothing to worry about. Go down and talk to them," which is typically what so-called black mothers and fathers do, because we have a certain trust in the police. At least at one time we did. And so I went down. They came out. I agreed to talk to them. They immediately arrest me. Even though they said they just want to talk, they immediately arrest me. They take me to jail. They arrest me for first-degree murder. And it's just unbelievable. I don't believe this. And I keep telling these people, y'all got the wrong guy, didn't do this. So they take me up on they interrogate me for a couple of hours. And then at one point, they played the good cop, bad cop. So they couldn't get any information out of me. They take me up on the 9th floor, and it's cold. It's in February, and one of the windows is cracked or broken. And I tell him, I say, "Hey, man, it's cold in here." He just shuts the door. Ain't nothing in this room but a wooden bench, a toilet, and a sink. And so I'm thinking they're just going to leave me here for a little while, come back and get me, and then try some more of this interrogation. Well, they don't. They leave me there all night. So by the time I get down the next morning, I'm really, really cold. I mean, I'm frozen, and I done shivered all night. So they let me warm up for a little while, and we go through this process again. The good cop, bad cop, they hollering and screaming, and they trying to get me to sign a statement. "We know you did it." Keep repeating to me that we know you did this, and they screaming. And I'm terrified, because these are the people that's supposed to be protecting us. And who are you going to call when the very people who are supposed to be protecting you, the police, are doing the terrorizing? So anyway, we go through this, and it's a lot more to the story, but we go to trial. They give me a state lawyer. He was underpaid, overworked, didn't have the resources, and then they had another police officer come up there and just lie about some phony ballistics. He came up there and said that he found a bullet in my home that matched the bullet was taken from the deceased body, and that's what ultimately led to my conviction, notwithstanding that the witnesses that they promised deals, that they didn't reveal that these guys have been convicted of perjury, theft, bank robbery, safe cracking, and all other. They never revealed this stuff to the jury, and so they ultimately convicted me. And so I go to prison. And the judge, I never forget, the judge said, I'm sentencing you to prison for the rest of your natural life.
Wow. And I'm sure at that moment, it felt like somebody pulled your lungs, your heart, and everything just out of your body.
It was the most devastating moment of my life. I mean, nothing in life could have prepared me for that. Nothing.
Wow. I'm speechless because, and that's very rare, especially being a talk show host. But to sit here and I read a little bit about your story, but to hear you tell the story and follow along, and knowing that I have a family member right now that's incarcerated on a wrongful conviction that also has cancer and a few other illnesses that they don't even care about. They won't even, it's a federal case that he could be in a medical facility so he can get proper treatment. They don't even care if he dies or not, period. So I can't even imagine, you know, once you were convicted and then incarcerated, some of the things that you've seen and some of the things that you've gone through within that 34-year time frame. And I also can't even imagine having your own business and not even being able to not just only see your children, Mr. Terrell, but you can't even provide for your children anymore.
At all. At all. It's been a horrific experience, but throughout it all, I've gained the courage to be able to stand up for what was right. You know, I feel like David going against Goliath. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm at with it now. I also call it the Harriet Tubman experience, because going through what Harriet Tubman went through, I couldn't even imagine. Mm-hmm. But going through what I'm going through, I still can't imagine no one else going through it, or going through what all the exonerees been through. It is, I want to say, it just has to stop. Mm-hmm. We have to stand up.
Mm-hmm. And that is a perfect segue into our next segment. So we're going to go to break, and we're going to listen to a little bit of a song called As a Black Man by my cousin Millard Thomas Jr. off of his CD, What's Your Request, that can be downloaded off of iTunes. And when we come back, we're going to hear a little bit from our producer, who I get to come from behind the scenes sometimes and engage in conversation, Trisha Duckworth, and we're going to talk about this needs to stop and prosecutorial misconduct and all of that. So let's hear a little bit of As a Black Man by Millard Thomas Jr., and we'll be back.
I'm just trying to do the best that I can as a strong black man. Yeah. Here I stand as a strong black man, having done all I can to please my fellow man. I don't understand why that knife is in your hand. After doing all I can as a strong black man, I'm gonna take my stand as a black man. I will do the best that I can as a black man. I stand on my own as a black man. I'm gonna sing my song. Oh, this is me. So hear my plea. I'm a young black man, down on my knees. I say this world is wrong, As a strong black man, I feel the rain falling down on me. If you could see what's on my mind, oh, you will see. Everyone would be more kind. Everyone would be happy. I'm gonna keep on my goal. I won't let it go. As a black man, gonna take my stand. As a black man, I'ma do the best that I can. Oh, as a black man, I stand on my own. As a black man, I'm gonna sing my song. Sometimes I gotta move. Gotta press my way through. Gotta press my way through. No, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no.
You were listening to As a Black Man by Millard Thomas Jr., and he started talking about some of the struggles of being a black man in America. You can download that CD called What's Your Request off of iTunes. So we talked a little bit about Mr. Siggers and Mr. Terrell's cases. But now let's talk about what even led to the wrongful conviction. So I'm going to let you hear a little bit from Trisha Duckworth, who is also the executive director of Survivor Speaks, who is doing a lot of work, and she heads up the Michigan Wrongful Conviction Coalition. So let's talk about some of that misconduct. Trisha, you can take the mic from here.
You know, we were talking earlier, when it comes to misconduct, it all starts somewhere, right? It starts with the cops. Because if you don't have these bogus, rogue cops making up bogus charges against people, then you wouldn't even wind up in the court system. So I believe that's where it starts at. So we were thinking, oh, we need to do something about prosecutorial misconduct, which we do. But we also need to do something about these police officers that are drumming up these charges on people that don't even exist. It's all a lie. And Mr. Siggers, because I do know in your case, there was a cop that was responsible for most of what happened to you. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is. He's the chief detective. He was the chief detective in this case. And he was going and picking the witnesses up, going to their home, bringing them to court, dropping them off. He even issued a writ of habeas corpus for one of the witnesses and had him writted to his custody as opposed to the jail itself. Why would he come to you? Why would he be writted to your custody and he's scheduled to testify in a couple of days? Why would he be? This is the type of stuff that goes on. This is the type of stuff that went on in my case. They had one of the witnesses, and this is going on all across the country. You know, wrongful conviction is somewhat people describe as the new civil rights, if you will. And though there's some slight comparison, but nothing compared to what I found, African Americans went through during the 400 years of slavery, and a lot is still going on today.
Yeah.
But, you know, one of these guys, he portrayed himself as an expert of forensics. And, you know, all across the country, you got these phony experts that's getting up there saying that this matched this and this matched, and some of them are not even qualified to give testimony. They're not even experts. Anyway, this guy, he says that he was in the Detroit Crime Lab for 6 years and that he needed to work at least 2 years to become qualified to give testimony. We found out that this guy hadn't even been in the crime lab for 1 year.
Oh, no.
And so he had been in there for he had been in there 364 days.
Wow.
And he got up there and lied. And it was just, he got up there and said, well, one bullet had 4 lands and grooves, another one had 12, and he said they matched. That is scientifically impossible.
Wow.
And everybody went for this. And this is how they ultimately convicted me. And as you know, they closed down the Detroit Crime Lab in 2008 because of some of the atrocious behavior and some of the test results that they were coming up with that were just plain false.
Wow. So we talked about prosecutor misconduct, but it's just about being accountable, these individuals being accountable. Today we heard, and I won't say from who, but today we heard that they are actually trying to work on something about the forensic testing and to hold individuals accountable for that. Like, how in the world can you say something is a match and you know that it is not?
Right.
Yeah, pretty much, especially with Actshun's case. Like, how do you accuse someone of criminal sexual conduct? You don't have any semen, you don't have like any forensic evidence to even prove it, and throwing out evidence, like not reviewing tapes and all of that stuff. What is that about?
The whole thing with the judicial system is there's no accountability. If we remember when we went to school, you had the legislator who had to check on the executive branch. You had the executive branch who had to check on the judicial branch, and the judicial branch checked on. Now, neither one of those guys are checking on nothing. Remember, they're not even teaching that in school anymore. The checks and the balances. And then, also during my case, for my appeal, my lawyer, court appointed, gets sick. From the time to follow a regular appeal to the time when they deny appeal, you have 56 days to take it to the Michigan Supreme Court. My lawyer tells me she gets sick. She gets my appeal February 24th. I don't hear from her until April 13th, which significantly cut down my time to file an appeal with the Supreme Court, which gave me approximately 3 days.
Oh, my goodness.
I have all this in writing. I have a note from her, a letter from her stating this, that she was sorry about the case and she's gotten sick, because I was calling her quite often to try to find out. But once again, the accountability,
And none of that was taken into consideration as she was sick. It seemed like they could have given some type of leniency or whatever to extend the amount of time that you had if you clearly have evidence, but they don't care.
They don't care.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
They're not there for justice. They're there for, it seems like, monetary value. What does the Supreme Court really do? What cases are they looking at? If they're not looking at the cases that's coming from the smaller courts, and they denying it, I don't know the exact number. What's the exact number that they deny people? It is extremely high compared to how many they accept and overturn.
Out of 100 cases, maybe one gets granted that goes through our court system. The system is not designed to reverse convictions. It is easier to deny a case because if I deny you, then you just have to go to the next step. If I grant you, I have to call all these old witnesses back. I have to bring all this old evidence back. I have to redo another trial. I have to push back my docket. So it's just easier to deny than it is to grant. And then you have to consider what are the courts looking for. But to a point you made, there has to be some accountability, and a lot of it starts with the police.
Yeah.
And so we have some good police officers, some dedicated police officers, but then we have a segment of police officers who went through and seen a lot of bad stuff in their time, and now they just feel like they are above the law. I've seen them, beat people, and we've seen this is no new phenomenon. Look at the Trayvon Martin situation.
Yeah.
So, and there's no accountability. They don't get, all they get is sued. They don't go to prison. In almost every case where you've seen, they had guys where police officers shot guys in the back, and if it wasn't for a video camera, somebody taking their phone and videoing it, what would have happened? And so,
And then they still don't get locked up.
they have to be, it has to be
They
better
just
training.
lose their job.
It has to be more training. And,
Right.
And they still can go get other jobs.
And then get a job
and
somewhere else. They shouldn't even be
Yeah.
able to practice law enforcement anymore and get jail time.
Yeah, I've seen a police officer lose a job in one jurisdiction and go right to another jurisdiction. Who's doing a background check on them? But yet, when you got a wrongful conviction on you, or you've been exonerated, they're giving you a hard time.
Yeah.
And you're cleared of these things.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? And this guy is taking a life.
Well, that's the issue. There is, because there's no accountability, there's no deterrent, right? There's no reason for them to think that if they do something wrong, that they'll get in trouble for it. So, of course, and with prosecutors, they need that conviction rate. So it's all driven by greed. It's selfish, and it needs to be put to a stop. And that's one of the biggest things that we want to work on with the task force, is to bring that accountability piece in. The thing is that, like the brother said, they don't teach these things in school anymore. You don't hear a lot about them because they want to silence the voice of the people. If we don't know what to do, right, then we can't fight. But that's what has to happen. The people have to rise up, and we all have to come together and fight. Legislators, regular lay people, exonerees. And what I want to really drive home on is that just because you're not wrongly incarcerated, just because you don't have a family member that's wrongly incarcerated, does not mean that it cannot one day happen to you. But even a step further, these are your tax dollars being wasted because they spent all of this money to do this court case on the wrong person while the right person is out there somewhere. So once they let this person go, now they got to go back and spend money again to try the right person. So it's just so inefficient, where if we do what we're supposed to do from the jump street, it would make things so much easier. The state would have so much more money than what they have right now. So it has to stop.
And one of the most valuable tools that we have is the power of the vote.
Yes.
That's one of the most equalizing forces that we have, the power of the vote. And so when you start voting, a lot of these judgeships, a lot of these prosecutorial races, they're decided by less than 100 to 200 votes in some of these local communities. So people have to get out and vote. You have to vote your conscience. You just can't sit at home and complain about problems. You got to be about solutions. That's what this has to be about. You got to look for solutions, get off your duff, get out and vote, get out and march, do whatever you have to do to stop this problem. Because it's not, and unless we stand up, unless we do something, hold people accountable, it's going to continue.
Yeah.
Police officers can do stuff with impunity. They can go crack your head, slap you, throw you on the ground, and then pull you out your car. That's not what our society. That's not what citizenry should be about. Y'all talk about what we used to teach in school. They used to teach civics in school. They don't teach civics anymore. Civics is a social science to deal with the rights and duties of a people. And so you need to know about the Constitution. People don't teach about the Constitution. What's your human? I wrote a book recently. When I went through the process, I had 16 lawyers over my period of incarceration. And lawyers play a role in this as well. Because if lawyers were to do, and I'm not saying all lawyers out there, because they got some really, really good lawyers out there. I mean, as a matter of fact, I got one right now. But it took me 34 years to find him. And I had 16. Some of them were good, some of them weren't. But the point is, lawyers have to take a little bit more responsibility as well. And this is why I wrote it. And they have lawyers that are cheating families, taking thousands of dollars from families, because they know they're desperate. And see, families don't know how to deal with lawyers. I wrote a book for that very reason, to teach you what you need to know when you're hiring a lawyer and what you need to know when you're filing an appeal. As a matter of fact, the name of the book is What You Need to Know Before Filing an Appeal and What You Need to Know Before Hiring a Lawyer. And this book can be reached on Amazon. I recommend that all families have it. It's 58 pages. I recommend that all families get it because it teaches you some of the basic fundamental things you need to know when you're dealing with a lawyer or when you're about to file an appeal. And I've been through this process, so I have a unique perspective to be able to show people what it is they need to know when they're filing these appeals or when they're seeking to hire lawyers. Because a lot of times when you're hiring a lawyer, that means you're in trouble. And at some point, listen, and not even that, but see, at some point in your life, all of us going to come in contact with a lawyer at some level, whether it's through real estate, whether it's through divorce, whether it's through product liability, car crash, insurance, or whatever. And you need to know how to deal with lawyers. And this book tells you how to deal with them.
I appreciate that. And when you were talking about, our vote is our voice, but one thing I would like to see improve is the jury pool. How can you have a jury of your peers if our peers dodge in the jury pool process? You can't have a jury of your peers if we don't show up. And I feel like, the amount of pay that's allocated, through the court system for jury duty should be increased. That's primarily why a lot of people, and I'll admit, before I got involved with this type of process, I wanted to dodge it too. I wasn't getting paid from my job. So I'm going to come down there and get a couple of dollars a day. I still have my bills. I still have all of these things going on with me personally, and who's to say how long I'm going to be down here, right? So I'm losing income and everything coming down here. At that time, very young, early 20s, didn't realize someone's life or livelihood would be on the line. So I feel like the pay for jury duty needs to be increased. It needs to be at least what you're getting anywhere. If you're working somewhere, you know, it should be comparable pay. And I believe more of us need to register and show up. And when I say more of us, black people, you cannot be judged by a jury of your peers if we don't show up.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because it was a lady on the jury. After we went through all the jury selections, there was a lady on the jury that I didn't know about it. I was ignorant to what happens when you do jury selection. But the lady was raped. So after we deliberated, my case went to deliberation after 3 days. So they went in for 3 days, and the lady came out. When she came out, she looked directly at me. They had me turn my back, which was the first time I ever had seen this. They had me turn my back to the jury. My back was turned to the jury throughout the whole case. They did. My back, they made me turn around with my back facing. I had to face towards the security guards and the police department, and turn my back towards the jury. The jury, one of the jury ladies, when she came out, she folded her arms, she looked directly at me, and she gave me a smirk and nodded. White lady at that. And I just shook my head like, I'm innocent. You didn't listen to what happened? They told you it was a tape, and all he had to do was go get the tape. You know, and like Brother Siggers said, you know, what you need to know before following a lawyer, I needed to know some of this stuff that he knows now out here. I've been fighting since 2013. And just from being with him, a couple of days of working with him, I learned so much. He's helping me get cleared. You know, it's a lot of things in the book that I haven't spoke on because I want people to read my story. You know, kind of like the exonerated 5. I went through everything they went through without going to prison.
Wow. You know what I find interesting, I was just reading lately where there's a prison, I can't remember exactly where, but they don't want any more Black liberation, Black history, or empowerment books allowed to be given to the inmates. So, you know, they don't even want us to have that information. So it is time for a break. You've been listening to 88.1 FM Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream with Actshun Terrell and Mr. Darryl Siggars. We have been talking about, do all lives really matter? We're asking for an innocent man that they've locked up in a cage. And we'll be back after this break. You have been listening to Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream, 88.1 FM in the Highland Park, Detroit area, and 107.3 WVIE in the Virgin Islands. We just heard a track called Seize the Moment by Millard Thomas Jr. on the What's Your Request CD that you can download off iTunes. I can't say enough. He's my cousin.
And he's amazing.
And he's amazing. And I love him so much. But
Family
I thought
love.
Seize the Moment was an appropriate song for this next segment because both of these exonerees and these gentlemen, they have written books. Mr. Darryl Siggars, he talked about his book, What You Need to Know Before Hiring a Lawyer and What You Need to Know Before Filing an Appeal. This book can be found on Amazon. And then Actshun, he wrote a book, Camouflage Cries, All Lies on Me. So let's talk a little bit to Actshun, the motivation behind the book. So you seize the moment to me, you wanted to spread some type of knowledge and some type of information to other people to help them so that they can seize the moment and get the best experience they can with this, because we talked about corrupt lawyers, we talked about corrupt prosecutors, police, and all of that stuff. So I know there was some inspiration to help others. So let's start with Camouflage Cries, All Lies on Me. What inspired that title? And tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, the inspiration behind the title was, we as men are like soldiers. People don't understand soldiers get wounded too, but they still have to go on and battle. Men, we out here, black men especially, they don't know the plight of the black man. So we have to sit out here and we go to war. We might be at war with our families. We might be at war with our job. We might be at war with anybody. We're constantly at war, especially with the judicial system. So when you fight in this war, you can't cry. Like a soldier on the battlefield, he can't cry. He gets shot or hurt. He shows he's wounded, but he still has to go in and battle if he's able to. With us as black men in this war or this fight we call life, we wounded, but we still have to camouflage our cries and make it work. So the title comes from me camouflaging my cries and stepping up and putting my ignorance to the side. My story is about faith, fortitude, and the biggest thing is forgiveness. I forgave the young lady that lied. I'm not mad at the children because that's what children do. I've done it. I'm not mad at the detective anymore. I'm not mad at this judicial system anymore. But I am willing to step up and make this change. I am willing to be the face of innocence. I am willing to be the guy that spearheads a lot of this movement that we're trying to do. I didn't spend time in prison, which was, thank to God. It was God, by God's grace. But I did have enough fortitude to stand through and stand up and let everybody know. And I'm going to be like, there's a title in my book, chapter 12. It's called From Atheist to Faithiest. That chapter right there is one of the most inspirational chapters I could have written. I'm not a writer. I went to Cass Tech. I graduated. I got a D in writing. I'm not a speaker. I got a D in speaking. Well, here I am writing books and I'm speaking. So I'm able to tell my story, but use it as a catapult. I wouldn't want to do what I did all over again. But I'm glad it did happen to me. So it catapulted me to heights and people that it catapulted me to be right here, to be able to speak. It catapulted me to be with a wonderful person right here. I tell him this every day, and he sees this. Just today, we met some important people. I don't want to mention any names because I don't know, but I've spoken with guys just by meeting this guy.
Oh, yeah.
You
He's
know,
a powerful brother.
Exactly.
He's a powerful
And-
brother, and just so humble.
Yes.
So humble
He's
and powerful.
teaching me.
I am extremely grateful to be in the presence of both of you on today. I can't tell you how humble and grateful I am for your transparency.
Thank you.
And for your willingness to give back and educate
Yes.
others by just telling your story. You know, you're empowering someone. And with that, let's talk to Mr. Siggers about his book. What you need to know before hiring a lawyer and what you need to know before filing an appeal. Tell us the inspiration behind the book. What made you want to reach back and give others this knowledge?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you all for your kind and thoughtful sentiments. I wrote this book because I wanted to educate the public. It was one of the things that I lacked when I was inside. And so I didn't let prison make me bitter. I allowed it to make me better. Every day once I learned, I began to study. The more I read, the more I wanted to read. I got my GED, I got my associate's degree, I was going on to get my bachelor's degree because I understood the power of education. See, education allows you to go through doors that would have otherwise been closed.
That's right.
And so education allows us to make informed life choices. And so I wrote this book to educate the families. This book breaks down some of our rights, the right to remain silent. A lot of times police get individuals in a room and they squeeze them and they just put so much pressure on them. They will say anything just to stop that pressure from occurring to them. But I'm telling, I want to educate families. I want to educate guys inside about what their rights are. The right to remain silent, about your Fifth Amendment right, about your Sixth Amendment right, about all your most important rights that you need to know. I break down some of the legal terms that families need to know. 'Cause sometimes sometimes we're so intimidated when we go into a courtroom, we don't even want to go in the courtroom, because it has an eerie quietness in the courtroom. Anybody's been in there and you're listening to people talk about these terms, some of these legal terms. When I first went to prison, I didn't know nothing about court rules and the Michigan rules of evidence and jury instruction and all these things. And when I went there, I slept law, I ate law, breathed law, went to the library every chance I got so that I could learn what I needed to know to defend myself. And that's what I wanted to do, is pass this down through this book. Even though it's only 58 pages, it only contains some of the basics of what people need to know. This is stuff you need to know when you're about to file an appeal, because the system, if you don't, it will eat you, it will chew you up. And
Yes,
so
it will.
I'm in a very unique position because I went through this stuff. And so I can pass this stuff on. And see, what really inspired me to write the book, a lady called me and she said a lawyer had cheated her out of $40,000. And she continues to call me. Even today, she continues to call me seeking solutions. And so that's one of the things that inspired me to write this book, because in this book, it isn't going to cure all the ills of how lawyers treat families and people inside, but it will give us an opportunity to work together to make the system better. What is written in this book also protects lawyers as well, with certain things like a retainer agreement. You know, most people go give a lawyer $10,000 without getting a retainer agreement saying what he's going to do for it. They don't get a case evaluation. They don't get nothing. When you go have a muffler put on your car, you get an estimate. When you go get a roof put on your house, you get an estimate. When you go get something major, you get an estimate. They don't even get an estimate. They just say, most of my debts, how much would you charge me? My son is in jail for murder. How much would you charge? Lawyers say $20,000. They go give him 20 grand. And then that's not how to do it. You know, so you have to protect yourself. And so my purpose in writing this book was to educate the public on some of the basic fundamental things that they need to know when hiring a lawyer or filing an appeal.
Wow. Well, I know I'm going to get a copy of it, and I want to read it for knowledge, just to help with the advocacy work that we're doing with the Michigan Wrongful Conviction Task Force. But it's just a blessing for you to be able to share. That's another thing that we need to work on in the Black community. We're like, well, hell, we made it out. We don't reach back and you know, we don't have a Harriet Tubman syndrome. Like, okay, I made it out and I figured this out, so let me go back and save some more people, you know, or bring them with me for various reasons. And some are justifiable, but thank you for even taking the time. to do that and put that together, because it's a lot of families that could use that information.
Yes.
There's one thing that I am very disgruntled about, and I feel is reprehensible, and that is the Compensation Act that goes along with exoneration. These little technicalities. So they say you get $50,000 a year for every year that you've been incarcerated. Of course, they never designed anything for us to get rich, or whatever. But this technicality that even made you ineligible after 34 years. Can you speak on that a little bit? Because I thought, hey, if you were exonerated and considered an exoneree, that you get the compensation. Then I found out there's certain language and technicalities that prohibit that.
That is true.
And you happen to be in one of those situations.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it took about 10 years to even get the Wrongful Imprisonment Compensation Act passed. It's called WICA, which is the acronym, as you just aptly just stated, the Wrongful Imprisonment Compensation Act. And so they had to settle for some draconian language in it from the very beginning. It was poorly written from the very beginning. But then they had some conservative judges reinterpret what this statute meant. So now you have to show clear and convincing, newly discovered evidence of actual innocence. So that's 6 different elements. I mean, it's almost impossible. If you don't have DNA evidence and you basically on camera going through an airport 400 miles away from where this crime supposedly happened, you almost excluded from being eligible for these funds. And so the Wrongful Imprisonment Compensation Act should be just what it stands for. If you were wrongfully incarcerated
That's right.
or wrongfully
I
in
agree.
prison, you should be eligible for these funds.
Yes.
But that's not how it's being allocated. That's not how it's being interpreted. You know, again, you have judges that came on and reinterpreted. They have several Michigan Court of Appeals decisions that have came down that have reinterpreted the statute in a more limited, in a more restrictive way that prevents people from being eligible. And it's a tragedy. Here it is right now.
Absolutely. That is reprehensible. You spent 34 years of your life in prison for a crime that you did not commit, and they don't want to give you a dime. At the least, reimburse for all the phone calls and commissary off rip. You know, if they don't even want to do the $50,000, which I think that's still not enough, and you should be entitled to it if you're exonerated, regardless of the technicalities. But look at how much money the family spend.
That's right.
Accepting phone calls and getting commissary and all of that. And I was talking to Mr. Salters when he was on the show, and I said at the Wrongful Conviction Summit, at the least, when an exoneree feet hit the ground, they should have that first $50,000 installment that day. Because it takes, everyone doesn't have a family ready to receive them. You know, you have some family members who may not even, or people in general who may not even believe you're innocent or whatever. You don't have people that may be so readily available to embrace you and bring you in. That first $50,000 check should be cut the day that your feet hit the ground.
Exactly.
You know, and they just release you. And then I was floored when Mr. Salters told me, you don't even get any services. Of course, you don't want to be on probation or parole because you're innocent, right? But you don't even get help getting a Social Security card. You don't get help finding housing. You don't get any help getting a driver's license or whatever. You're just free and clear of the system with nothing. Do they even give you any money at all when you're released?
No.
So you're just out.
Yeah, it was a guy who was doing a program in which he would give $500. He was doing through a nonprofit that he started. His name was Wyan Kinski. I can't remember exactly, but his program, if you would get out and he knew about it and you came to him, his nonprofit would give you $500. But they exhausted that program from him.
Kenneth Wynenski.
Yeah.
And it's really tragic because it's really hard. Just think of it this way. I went to prison, I was 20 years old. I get out 34 years and all I know is prison. And then you just tell me, okay, you free. I don't know nothing about cell phones. I don't know nothing about mortgages. I don't know nothing about paying bills, computers. So it's like saying to a child, get out and fend for yourself.
Right.
And then you don't have any money. They don't give you, you can't get driver's license, you don't have a credit history, so you can't get a credit card. And I don't even know how to use a credit card. I didn't even know how to order a meal in a restaurant.
Social
These are some of the
media,
things
another
that you,
thing.
some of the
Small
things
things that you don't even
people
think about.
don't really consider when they just kicking a guy out. But don't get me wrong, I'm grateful to be out, and I've made my way, but it wasn't easy. But I've had a lot of people to support me and to help me find my own way, and I hit the ground running. I was not going to allow my condition to be a hindrance to me doing what it was I needed to do for myself. I got out and established my own business. I've been at every major university in the state of Michigan giving speeches. I've been in community centers. I've been in prisons and so forth and so on. But everybody doesn't have those opportunities.
Right,
Absolutely.
right.
Very few of them.
Absolutely.
I'm probably very unique in that the assistance that I've received. But it's still hard for me.
Yeah.
Very, very
Oh,
hard.
yeah. I'm
And
sure.
so
You said something that just hit me. You said, I'm grateful to be out. And that's cool. I like that. But it just enrages me that they act as if they did you a favor
Exactly.
by letting you out. But we're going to keep working on this stuff. So
Yes, we will. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but we definitely will pick this discussion up at a later date. Look forward to Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream podcast coming soon. Real soon. So we will be doing podcasts and we will be digging a little bit deeper into some of these subjects. And we also have some agreement from Mr. Siggers and Mr. Terrell to be on some of the Black Coffee, No Sugar, No
excited.
Cream podcasts. So
to be on there too.
thank you for that. And we will delve deep into these topics with an ongoing series so we can get this knowledge out there and let the stories be told. You have been listening to 88.1 FM WHPR if you're in Highland Park in Detroit, and WVIE 107.3 in the Virgin Islands. This is Black Coffee, No Sugar, No Cream, where we're not trying to spill the tea or make you feel dazed like you had a shot of cheap liquor. It's just to articulate strong, truthful, and powerful statements to make you hear, and to make you see, and to make you feel things from a different perspective. Mine. Have a great week, Detroit and Virgin Islands. We'll be right back at you next Monday, 7 p.m. Take care.